Listen carefully. Schopenhauer observed that a high degree of intellect is purchased only by an equally high degree of misery. If you have ever wished you could be less intelligent, if you have fantasized about living with the simple contentment of ordinary minds, today you will understand why intelligence functions as a curse in social contexts and why this curse cannot be lifted. This is not metaphor or exaggeration. This is philosophical recognition that the same capacity that allows you to understand reality more deeply also condemns you to suffer more profoundly and exist more alone. Today, you will learn why intelligence is a curse, how this curse operates across every dimension of social existence, and whether any redemption is possible for those burdened with consciousness. If you are ready to understand why intelligence is a curse and how to bear this burden with dignity, leave "I carry the curse" in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications for more philosophical truths about the price of consciousness. Schopenhauer's philosophy begins with a shocking claim that contradicts everything modern culture teaches. Intelligence does not make life better. In fact, beyond a certain threshold, intelligence makes life worse. This contradicts the narrative you have been taught since childhood, that education is good, that learning improves you, that intelligence is an advantage to cultivate. But Schopenhauer argues that this narrative is false, a comforting lie told by societies that need to justify their educational institutions and maintain the illusion that consciousness has purpose. Why is intelligence a curse? Because intelligence brings awareness, and awareness brings suffering. The person of limited intelligence lives in a smaller perceptual world. They see less, understand less, anticipate less. Their consciousness is narrow, focused on immediate concerns, satisfied by simple pleasures. They do not contemplate the inevitability of death, the meaninglessness of most human striving, the futility of desire, the suffering inherent in existence itself. These philosophical recognitions simply do not occur to them. And because these recognitions do not occur, they do not suffer from them. But the intelligent person cannot avoid these recognitions. Your mind automatically analyzes, questions, sees patterns, draws conclusions. You cannot choose to not understand what your intelligence reveals. When you look at human behavior, you automatically see the unconscious drives, the self-deception, the futile repetition of patterns that lead nowhere. When you contemplate your own life, you cannot avoid recognizing how arbitrary your existence is, how temporary all satisfaction proves to be, how death makes everything ultimately meaningless. These insights are not optional. They are the inevitable product of analytical consciousness. Schopenhauer argues that consciousness evolved as a survival tool, a way for organisms to navigate complex environments. But consciousness, like any tool, can become too sophisticated for its purpose. A knife sharp enough to cut anything will cut the person holding it. Intelligence sharp enough to cut through all illusions will cut through the illusions that make life bearable. And once these illusions are destroyed, they cannot be restored. You cannot choose to believe comforting lies after you have seen through them. This is the curse. Intelligence gives you sight you cannot close, understanding you cannot forget, awareness you cannot escape. The curse operates across multiple dimensions simultaneously. First, intelligence destroys the simple pleasures that satisfy ordinary people. When someone of limited intelligence watches a movie, they engage with the surface story, feel the intended emotions, enjoy the experience without analysis. But when you watch the same movie, your mind automatically notices plot holes, analyzes character motivations, recognizes manipulation techniques, sees through emotional manipulation. You cannot just enjoy the movie. Your intelligence prevents the simple pleasure that others experience naturally. The same pattern repeats across all forms of entertainment and distraction. Music becomes mathematical patterns rather than pure emotional experience. Art becomes technique to analyze rather than beauty to absorb. Social rituals become anthropological phenomena to study rather than meaningful ceremonies to participate in. Your intelligence creates distance between you and direct experience. Everything becomes mediated through analysis, and this mediation prevents the unreflective enjoyment that makes life tolerable for ordinary minds. Second, intelligence reveals the futility of most human pursuits. The person of limited intelligence can pursue career success, accumulate wealth, build social status, achieve recognition, and feel genuinely satisfied by these accomplishments. These goals provide direction, motivation, meaning. But the intelligent person sees through these pursuits. You recognize that career success is arbitrary, that wealth brings new anxieties rather than satisfaction, that social status is a game of collective delusion, that recognition is usually unrelated to actual merit. These insights make it impossible to pursue conventional goals with genuine conviction. Schopenhauer himself struggled with this problem. He had intelligence sufficient to see that most human striving was futile, but he could not escape the will to live that drove him to want recognition, success, influence. He suffered from the contradiction, intellectually understanding that his desires for fame and acknowledgement were meaningless, but emotionally still craving these things. This contradiction is torture. You cannot satisfy desires you recognize as futile, but you cannot eliminate desires just by recognizing their futility. You are trapped between understanding and wanting, between seeing truth and feeling drives that contradict that truth. Third, intelligence destroys relationships by making genuine connection nearly impossible. Relationships require shared understanding, but intelligence creates unbridgeable cognitive gaps. When you try to share your thoughts with someone of significantly lower intelligence, they cannot follow your reasoning. When they share their concerns with you, you cannot help but see complications and implications they miss. This asymmetry makes authentic communication impossible. You are always translating, simplifying, or remaining silent about your actual thoughts. Even with people of similar intelligence, relationships are difficult because intelligence breeds independence. The intelligent person recognizes that they are ultimately alone, that no one can truly understand their interior experience, that all connection is partial and temporary. This recognition makes the commitment and vulnerability that relationships require seem irrational. Why invest deeply in connections that cannot bridge the fundamental isolation of consciousness? The intelligent person sees too clearly the limitations of relationships to surrender fully to them. Fourth, intelligence increases suffering by expanding awareness of suffering. The person of limited intelligence suffers from immediate personal problems, their own pain, their immediate losses, their direct frustrations. But the intelligent person suffers from awareness of universal suffering. You see not just your own difficulties, but the systematic suffering of humanity, the structural injustices that crush millions, the historical patterns of cruelty and oppression, the inevitable suffering that consciousness itself creates. Your empathy extends beyond your immediate circle to include people you will never meet, animals whose suffering humans cause, even the suffering of future generations who will inherit the consequences of present actions. This expanded awareness means you carry the weight of suffering you cannot alleviate. You know that while you read this, people are starving, being tortured, dying in preventable ways, suffering from diseases that could be cured if resources were allocated differently. You know that most human and animal suffering serves no purpose, teaches no lessons, produces no greater good. It is simply meaningless suffering caused by indifferent natural processes and human cruelty. This knowledge is unbearable, but intelligence makes it unavoidable. Fifth, intelligence creates existential anxiety that ordinary people do not experience. The person of limited intelligence accepts the world as it appears. They do not question why anything exists, why consciousness exists, what death means, whether life has inherent purpose. These questions simply do not arise with force. But the intelligent person cannot avoid these questions. You lie awake contemplating the impossibility of nothingness, the arbitrariness of existence, the fact that you did not choose to be born, but cannot choose to never have been born. These thoughts create anxiety that has no solution because the questions have no answers. Schopenhauer spent his life trying to find philosophical solutions to existential anxiety. His answer, that we should recognize the futility of will and achieve a kind of resignation or even negation of will to live, provided some intellectual satisfaction but little emotional relief. Knowing philosophically that existence is suffering and that the solution is to want less does not eliminate the wanting. The curse of intelligence is that you can understand your condition perfectly and still suffer from it completely. Sixth, intelligence isolates you socially in ways that create practical disadvantages beyond mere loneliness. In human society, success often depends on social skills, networking, building alliances, reading political situations. But intelligence makes these social games difficult or impossible. You see through the fakeness, cannot participate authentically in manipulation, recognize the emptiness of networking rituals. This honesty becomes a severe disadvantage in systems where success requires social performance. You watch less intelligent but more socially skilled people advance in careers, build influential networks, achieve positions of power, not through merit, but through social manipulation. You could potentially learn these skills, but doing so requires betraying your intellectual integrity, pretending to care about people you do not respect, engaging in conversations you find meaningless, building relationships based on utility rather than genuine connection. Intelligence makes you too honest for social success, and this honesty keeps you marginalized regardless of your actual competence. Seventh, intelligence creates what Schopenhauer called the suffering of consciousness itself. Beyond all specific problems that intelligence creates, there is a meta-problem. The intelligent person is aware that they are aware, conscious that they are conscious, able to observe their own mind observing. This recursive self-awareness creates a kind of psychological vertigo. You can never simply be. You are always watching yourself being, analyzing your own analysis, thinking about your own thinking. This creates exhaustion that ordinary people never experience because they live more directly, less reflectively. Schopenhauer argued that this recursive consciousness is the highest form of suffering because it cannot be escaped even momentarily. Physical pain ends, emotional distress fades, external problems can be solved. But consciousness cannot escape from itself. You cannot stop being aware that you are aware. Even in sleep, the intelligent person often has vivid dreams that continue the analytical process. There is no rest from intelligence, no vacation from consciousness. You carry it every moment until death, and this carrying is itself a form of suffering, independent of specific content. Now, having established that intelligence is genuinely a curse, Schopenhauer confronts the obvious question: is there any redemption? Can this curse be lifted, managed, or transcended? His answer is characteristically pessimistic, but not entirely without hope. The curse cannot be lifted. Intelligence cannot be reduced or eliminated voluntarily. Once you have achieved philosophical consciousness, you cannot return to unreflective existence. The knowledge cannot be unknown. The awareness cannot be made unaware. In this sense, the curse is permanent. However, Schopenhauer offers strategies for bearing the curse with dignity and perhaps even finding moments of relief. First, recognize that the curse is also a distinction. You suffer more than ordinary people, but you also understand more, see more, exist more fully. The person who lives unreflectively has an easier life, but a lesser life. A life closer to animal existence than to full human potential. Your suffering is the price of genuine consciousness, and consciousness, despite its pain, has value that unreflective existence lacks. This is not comfortable consolation. Schopenhauer is not saying that suffering makes you better or that you should be grateful for the curse. He is saying that consciousness and suffering are inseparable, that you cannot have one without the other, and that consciousness, despite its cost, is preferable to unconsciousness. Would you really choose to be less intelligent if that choice were available? Would you really want to live with the simple contentment of minds that cannot see what you see, understand what you understand? Most intelligent people, when confronted with this choice honestly, choose to keep their intelligence despite its curse. Second, find temporary relief through aesthetic contemplation. Schopenhauer argued that art offers brief escape from the suffering of will. When you are fully absorbed in genuine aesthetic experience, in contemplating beauty without desire or analysis, consciousness momentarily transcends its usual suffering. The self disappears into pure perception. Time stops. The anxieties and frustrations that normally dominate consciousness fade into background. These moments are rare and brief, but they prove that relief is possible, that the curse can be momentarily lifted even if it cannot be permanently removed. Third, cultivate compassion for all conscious beings. If intelligence reveals universal suffering, let that revelation generate universal compassion. You suffer from consciousness. So does every other conscious being in varying degrees. This shared suffering creates connection, even with those you cannot communicate with directly. Schopenhauer argues that recognizing the unity of suffering is the foundation of ethics. When you see that all consciousness suffers, you naturally want to reduce suffering where possible, or at least not add to it unnecessarily. This compassion does not eliminate your suffering, but it gives suffering meaning beyond personal misery. Your awareness of universal suffering, instead of being merely torture, becomes motivation for whatever small actions might reduce total suffering. This is not optimism. Schopenhauer does not believe suffering can be eliminated from existence, but he believes that conscious beings have responsibility to not increase suffering unnecessarily, and that fulfilling this responsibility provides some purpose to the otherwise meaningless burden of consciousness. Fourth, accept that much of life will involve managing the curse rather than overcoming it. You will have good days when intelligence feels like gift rather than curse, when you appreciate your capacity for understanding, when consciousness seems worthwhile despite its costs. You will have bad days when the weight of awareness feels unbearable, when you wish desperately for the simple contentment of unreflective existence, when the curse seems too heavy to carry. Both experiences are real and valid. The task is not to reach some permanent state of accepting the curse, but to navigate the oscillation between appreciation and despair. Schopenhauer himself oscillated between these states throughout his life. His letters and essays reveal periods of satisfaction with his intellectual work, periods of bitter resentment about his social isolation, periods of philosophical acceptance, periods of rage at humanity's stupidity. He never transcended the curse. He carried it until death. But he carried it with intellectual honesty, refusing to console himself with false hope, while also refusing to abandon the work that gave his cursed existence whatever meaning it had. Fifth, remember that the curse is not your fault. You did not choose to be intelligent any more than you chose to be born. Intelligence is not moral achievement or character strength. It is biological accident, combination of genetics and environment that could have been different. The suffering that intelligence causes is not punishment you deserve or test you must pass. It is simply consequence of having the particular neurological structure that creates analytical consciousness. Understanding this removes the layer of suffering that comes from feeling you should be able to bear the curse better, or that weakness in bearing it reflects personal failure. Let me share concrete examples of how the curse operates in daily life. Imagine you are at a family gathering. Everyone is enjoying themselves, telling stories, laughing, participating in the warm feeling of connection. But your intelligence prevents full participation. You notice the stories are mostly exaggerated or simplified. You see the family dynamics, the unspoken tensions, the ways people perform roles. You understand that much of the warmth is performative, that people here hurt each other regularly despite the current positive feelings, that this gathering changes nothing about ongoing family problems. These observations do not make you superior. They make you separate. Everyone else is inside the experience, feeling it directly. You are outside the experience, analyzing it. Everyone else feels connected. You feel isolated by awareness. This is the curse in microcosm. Intelligence preventing you from participating fully in experiences that give others comfort and joy. Or imagine you achieve something conventionally impressive, a promotion, an award, a publication, some form of recognition. Ordinary people feel genuinely proud, satisfied, validated by such achievements. But your intelligence immediately contextualizes the achievement. You see how arbitrary the recognition is, how it depends on subjective evaluations and political factors rather than objective merit. You recognize that the satisfaction will be temporary, that this achievement changes nothing fundamental about your life or the world. You cannot simply enjoy the success because intelligence prevents the unreflective pleasure that success brings to others. Or imagine someone you care about is suffering. They have lost someone, failed at something important, experienced genuine trauma. Ordinary people can offer comfort through presence, through simple expressions of support, through sharing emotion. But your intelligence complicates compassion. You see that nothing you say will actually help, that suffering cannot be removed by words, that your presence changes nothing about their situation. You understand so clearly the limitations of comfort that offering it feels dishonest. Your intelligence makes even compassion difficult because you cannot pretend that simple gestures have more power than they actually have. These examples show that the curse is not abstract, philosophical problem, but concrete daily experience. Intelligence interferes with every dimension of life: pleasure, achievement, connection, even compassion. There is no sphere where intelligence is purely beneficial. Everything comes with costs that ordinary people do not pay. In the comments, share specific ways intelligence has functioned as a curse in your life. Not general statements about feeling isolated, but concrete examples of how intelligence prevented pleasure, destroyed simple satisfaction, complicated relationships, increased suffering. Being specific helps you recognize the mechanisms and helps others see that their experiences are not unique. We carry this curse collectively, even though we carry it separately. Remember Schopenhauer's ultimate insight. Intelligence is a curse, but consciousness is what makes you human rather than merely alive. The curse cannot be lifted, but it can be carried with understanding rather than confusion, with dignity rather than shame, with occasional moments of relief rather than unrelenting despair. You did not choose this burden, but you can choose how you bear it. This is the only freedom the cursed possess, not freedom from consciousness, but freedom in how consciousness is inhabited.